Good morning, everybody. Welcome. My name is Jane Callahan, and I think I'm introducing myself. I'm a member of Zumba Lutheran Church, and the story, I'm going to tell you a lot of stories today, and then we're going to leave time. I'm going to speak for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have 15 minutes of comments or questions, which I will try to answer, though I may not know the answer. We always knew that my dad had written a lot of letters from the Pacific when he was in World War II. But I said to my sister, "You have the letters." She said, "No, I don't." And I realized that I was the last person to go into my dad's house in Minneapolis and take everything out so we could show it and sell it. Just nice people. And when you're doing something like that, you do it very fast. So I did not know that I had the letters. And I was taking a decluttering class with the Learning is Forever people. And they got me down in my basement, and I looked at this chest and I said, "What is that?" And they sort of say to you, "Go find out what you have and give it away," And I opened it up, and here was a box, and in the box were 42 letters written. The first one I'll read is 1944, and the others are all from 1945. So he was deployed late, even though he volunteered right after Pearl Harbor Day. He was teaching social studies to the 12th grade in Patrick Henry High School in Minneapolis Public Schools. And the recruiters started going out to all the 12th grade classes. They were recruiting, in those days, the young men, but probably some of the women too, who signed up for their roles in World War II. But my dad always said they didn't realize they were recruiting the teacher. He was 27, he was unmarried, and as he said, he was an orphan. His parents died in their 50s, but at 27, they were gone. So he volunteered for the Navy, and he was trained at Great Lakes Naval Station. It's interesting to think that on December 7th, 1941, there were 6,000 men in the Great Lakes Naval Station. I looked this up. In 6 months, it was 68,000. Of the 4 million in the Navy during World War II, 1 million trained at the Great Lakes Naval Station. Now, the way they train you is to give you a lot of classes. What can you do? What are we going to use you for in the Navy? And in groups of 100, they would take these classes. So my dad was 27. They were 18 and 19 and 20. So he was the high point man. The high point man is usually sent on for further training. So he was sent to the Southwest to be trained as a weatherman and a navigator. And now I'm going to tell you a sad story. There'll be more than one today. Those other 99 men were put together on a ship in the Mediterranean, and Dad said he was in the Southwest. When he got the word, they went down with all hands. That's when you know you're in a war, that this is not nothing. So he's training, and my dad tells wonderful stories. He was a great storyteller, so some of these are, I'm telling you his story. So he said his commanding officer in the Southwest, Astoria and other places, called him in and said, "You have a master's degree, and you were in ROTC in college. You could have entered the Navy as an officer." And my dad said, he replied, "Yeah, but I don't know anything about the Navy." So, to which his commanding officer said, "Well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. We're making you an officer right now." So he went on for officer's training, and he was named the executive officer of the LST 717. Now, the reason he gets into the war so late, even though he was, I'm supposed to be showing you pictures. Let's do a few pictures. Tracy, I'm pushing my arrow. As my friend Janet Johnson said, whenever I get near a machine, they can smell my fear. And they go haywire on me. Okay, so let's just, I just have a couple visuals here. So this is Dad in his officer's uniform. This is the LST 717, and he was named executive officer. An LST is landing ship and tank, but my dad always said, his men said, no, that's not what it stands for. It stands for large, slow-moving target. It was launched in July of 1944, commissioned August of 1944. So he's getting into the war quite late. This is after a lot of the tough battles have been fought, and the Japanese had lost a lot of men and a lot of their ammunition, and you'll see how that happens. It's commissioned, so it goes from New Orleans through the Panama Canal and across the ocean, and that takes 2 or 3 months, so that's why he gets there, but he gets there ahead of Christmas because of the first letter here, and he was the only navigator on board, so he knew that if he got swept overboard, they wouldn't know where they were. They didn't go with a convoy, they weren't with a bunch of other ships, and he had never done this before, so he would tell the story that the night before he thought they were going to get to Milne Bay, which had been captured in 1942 and was the major port for the Americans in the Pacific, or one of them anyway. He went to the gunnery officer, who seems to have been a confidant, and said, either we hit land tomorrow, or I don't know where we are. Just a moment of nervousness here. Well, here's the first letter. From here on out, it's going to be Dad's voice, not mine, although I may comment once in a while. Here we go. December 26th. Dear folks, I'll have to tell you about our Christmas party. It was entirely a surprise to the men. I got a hold of some red cloth from one of the natives, he uses that word, and I had a bosun's mate make me a beard out of loose rope, and I put on rubber overshoes. I arranged a deal from an army major for some beer, so we gathered the crew. Then I came in singing jingle bells, etc. We gave each man 4 cans of beer and 4 packages of cigarettes, and you should have seen them. I have never seen men so overjoyed over so little. It did my heart good to watch them. The only discordant note was when those, quote, sons of heaven, unquote, I will only be saying the word Japanese today, pulled a surprise air raid, but it didn't last long, and we went back to finishing up the beer. Seemed funny not to have any snow or cold weather, though. Anyhow, I got back into form as Santa Claus. Carl. P.S. Thanks for the Christmas card, Carl. And one of the themes here is how important the mail was to these men as they're out there. February 2nd, 1945, aboard ship. Dear Vi, according to the new censorship regulations, we are allowed to mention where we were 2 weeks after we leave whatever spot it was. Therefore, I am not breaking any regulations in sending you this newspaper printed in Tacloban, the capital of Leyte. We left there January 15th, the day after I got this paper at the local press. I had expected the Philippines to be more modern than the other islands we have touched. I suppose it probably is around Manila, and I expect we will be there soon. Leyte, however, is very primitive, and the capital city is a sea of mud, squalid huts, and disease. Of course, it is sort of an out-of-the-way island compared to Luyo, but I was somewhat disappointed in its lack of cleanliness and modern equipment. There were several restaurants that advertised a chicken dinner for $7.50, but I never had the nerve to enter one. The little kids run around with dark-colored bottles hollering, whiskey, whiskey, one of the few English words they know. And there have been several deaths from drinking the damn stuff. Darn stuff, excuse me. Needless to say, I was not one of their customers. Say hello to Hans and Ruth. Carl. Oh, and I should tell you who he's writing to. These are the officers of the LST, and my dad is right there. Sorry, can you see where I'm pointing? Now, he had 2 older sisters, so the fact that he didn't have parents to write to didn't hinder his letter writing at all. That's Ruth on the far side, and this is Viola here. And they were very, very important to him through this whole thing. And you can see he's still in regular sailors. So I think this is taken right after he left the Great Lakes Naval Station and before he's going southwest to be trained and then deployed. And I have one more picture, don't I? Oh, yes, and this was a surprise in my decluttering. This is the article that was written when my dad retired from the Minneapolis Public Schools, and it mentions that he had the distinction of being the first person from the Minneapolis Public Schools to volunteer for the military after Pearl Harbor Day. Next letter, somewhere in Philippines aboard ship, February 27th. Dear Vi, I'm not much on souvenirs, but I thought you might get a kick out of foreign currency. The Philippine peso is worth 50 cents in American money. The Dutch guilder is worth 25 cents. And the Japanese invasion money is not worth the paper it is printed on. Maybe a little biased there, but you know. The army out here gets paid in pesos, and the last bunch we had on ship got in a poker game with our gunnery officer and myself. I now have 75 pesos in my pocket as a result. Well, at least when I get back, I will have a few campaign ribbons on my uniform, so they will know I am not a dry land sailor. I rate 3, American Theater, Asiatic Pacific, and Philippine Liberation, and I rate 2 stars for major invasions. Love, Carl. Now, he says, Philippines, aboard ship, March 29th. And here you really hear about the mail. Dear Vi, the mail situation had me down so much that I gave my mailman leave of absence and packed him on a plane, and he revisited a few of our last ports. When he returned, he had 30 bags of mail, so it was worthwhile. I got 15 letters out of it, 3 from you. On the credit side, my skin is a beautiful brown and my waistline has shrunk. We now get fresh provisions and our chow is wonderful. People should quit sending us food, as it is in such bad shape. When it gets here, one can't eat it. And anyway, we are better fed than people back home. We have steak at least twice a week and chicken or turkey every Sunday. Our baker makes wonderful pies and cakes, and we have ice cream at least once a week. For breakfast, we have fruit juice, wheat cakes, little pig sausages, etc. I have set up baskets on the tank deck, and when we are unloaded, we play there. I am coaching the team, and they have won the 3 games with other LSTs. My dad, sports, okay? We also play between the various divisions on ship. You can see by the officer's box score that I can still shoot baskets, if nothing else, as I was high point man. But boy, how tired I got, Carl. He always told us that in officers training, they said, yes, you have to run the ship, you have to do your duties and so on, but you also are responsible for keeping the morale of the men up. So that's where we get the basketball and we get the singing and so on and so forth. This is March 14th, somewhere in the Philippines aboard ship. Dear Vi, I shall devote the major part of this epistle to a description of Manila. The first time we saw it, we were not at liberty to go ashore. Even so, the sight of a skyline of buildings more than 2 stories high, of water tanks and church spires was enough to cheer us up. I suppose it is hard for you to visualize going 6 months without seeing even these obvious signs of what we choose to call civilization. I might add in explanation that those places you have heard of in the news, such as Manus, I'm not going to say the names right, Hollandia, Biak, Finchhaven, and even Tacloban in Leyte on Mindoro, are not in any sense of the word cities or towns. They have no buildings except mud huts, long since deserted by the natives. Of course, there are the rude structures hastily pounded together to accommodate our soldiers. Therefore, Manila was the first city I've seen that deserved the name since I left Mobile, Alabama last September. The first feeling at the sight of the debris is, of course, one of amazement. No matter how much you read and hear of the effects of naval bombardment and airplane bombing, you will never be able to realize its destructiveness until you see the ruins of a city. I had the feeling that if I had been a Filipino and returned to this rubble, this remnant of what was once a beautiful city, I would have thrown up my hands in a gesture of helplessness and then sat down on the nearest curb and wept. I have two of the letters if you want to see them, how they look. They're like onion skin. Sat down and wept. That was the effect it had on me, and after all, it was not my home, but only a vague place on the map, which I knew as a former possession of the United States with no particular cultural or spiritual ties to my country. We saw the wrecks of what had once been bridges, not primitive wooden ones, but structures of steel and cement of modern design built by American engineers. And now they looked as though some giant had taken them in his hands and crushed and beat them into grotesque shapes and figures. Looking across the river, one saw the ruins of a large building on which was barely discernible the words National Bank of the Philippines. There were restaurants, movies, bars, stores, laundries, all in shambles. Somehow the names of places stay intact on boards or on the cement, as if they are symbols that although the Japanese destroyed the physical structure, the entity and idea remained intact, to be reborn again in a better world of peace. Our return to the deck was less tiring as we hired a wagon drawn by a pony. These are called dokars, which might be a contraction of dog cart. Anyhow, they ply their trade among the servicemen and probably are among the best paid businessmen in Manila. It was a treat to go bumping along with little urchins running alongside shouting the three words of English they all know, "Hello, Joe," and "victory." I have limited this description to the physical aspects, and I had to out of necessity because there are no words in our language or any other to describe the human's misery, the agonized expressions on the faces of the older people, and the deformed bodies of the young. After a while, you actually get used to, sorry, I knew this would happen to them, but at first they stop you in your tracks, because although you know war is hell, you had never actually seen its effects. The only bright spot in the visit occurred in the foyer of one of the former movie houses. There we ran into two American women. We talked to them for about 5 minutes, and I can still remember every word that was said. They were the first white women we had seen since we left the States, except for a glimpse now and then of an army transport with wax aboard. Well, I have tried in my limited ability with words to picture Manila to you. I hope you will never have to see anything like it, and I hope Brian, his nephew, will not have to 20 years from now. Somewhere at sea aboard ship, April 20th, 1945. Dear Ruth, we crowded over 600 soldiers aboard here, and I certainly feel for those poor guys. Some of them had been out here 2.5 years and fought all the New Guinea, Solomon Islands, etc. And I told one of their officers that when we hit the beach and let them out the bow doors, our job is almost done. Well, those poor devils are just starting. He came right back at me and said, quote, "Yeah, but we jump into a foxhole, while you are just a sitting duck and a beautiful target to shoot at." And then back to my dad's voice. It's all in the point of view, I guess, but I still thank my lucky stars I am in the Navy. We are really lucky, have a good place to sleep and good chow. I talked to an officer on his way back to the States as his ship had been sunk. He told me to turn in an inventory of my belongings as in case a ship is sunk, when you get back to the States, the Navy reimburses you so you can buy a new outfit. I sometimes catch myself wishing we would hit a mine or something. Not enough to kill anyone, but enough so we would get back to the US. But I am kind of ashamed of such a selfish wish. Can't help but feel that way sometimes, though. Anyhow, don't get the idea that because I am sending this list home, that I think anything is going to happen to us, as I don't really. It seems to be getting easier as the Japanese don't have the planes and guns they used to. Of course, when we start hitting the Japanese coast itself, it will be tougher. Hope the kids are all over their sniffles. I should tell you that he told us that he was in meetings to plan the invasion of Japan. So when he gets back, I'm jumping ahead, when he gets back and he teaches, again, current events to 12th graders. He taught about the war. He was an eyewitness. I'm sure they listened to him. But when it came to discussing the dropping of the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, what he told them is, there's a big discussion about whether or not we should have done that. It's a philosophical discussion. It's a discussion. There's a great deal of difference of opinion. But he said, I'm not going to lead a discussion on that because I can't be objective, because I don't think I would have come back if I had been in the invasion of Japan. Aboard ship May 24th, 1945, dear Ruth and Vi, we have some Aussies aboard. Oh, this is fun. And this is the most enjoyable trip we have taken. Don't get the idea we have been to Australia. No such luck. We are just taking them from an advanced base to a new battle zone. But to return to the Aussies, after carrying American troops, they are like a breath of spring or something. They are so genuinely friendly, so courteous, and so thankful for any little favor that when we compare them with Americans, we feel ashamed. They are the most charming people I have ever met. The officer staying with me is a fellow named Palms. When I get little favors for him, like getting his laundry done or getting someone to cut his hair, he is so appreciative. Rather different from American officers who expect to be waited on hand and foot and then grumble. If the people in Australia are like these guys we have aboard, it should be a pretty good country. I suppose by now everything is getting green and summer is starting. It will be fun to get back to where there are seasons and the changes in nature to look at, instead of all heat and sun all the time. I'm in very good health and raring to go. Greet all, Carl. Now we're going to transition, because this is written August 16th. I'm just excerpting it. And something happened on August 15th, namely the dropping of the bombs on Japan. August 16th, dear Vi, we were at sea when the long-awaited news came over the radio. I hope you haven't been worried about the long lapse between letters, but we were at sea a long time, and so I had no way of writing. I won't try to describe my feelings now the war is over. It has taken a big piece of my life, 4 years, but I guess it was worth it. We will probably be out here for some time hauling stuff around. Sure wish I could be home for Christmas, as I hate to miss 5 Christmases. 4 is bad enough. And this is my favorite, he closes with this. Got a complete copy of the United Nations Charter from Alberta, that's a neighbor, which I'm studying with great interest. Hope to be explaining it to 12th graders soon. Carl. And now here's the one that I have the original of this if you want to see it. September 2nd. Dear Vi, I'm writing this letter on the morning of September 2nd, but will not be able to mail it for some time. However, I am so thrilled by what has transpired that I have to tell someone about it. It is 10 o'clock in the morning, and I have just listened to the President MacArthur and Nimitz. I suppose you have been listening too, but of course it is the evening of September 1 where you are. I have the added advantage over you in that I can look out over Tokyo Bay, over to where the Missouri is. I am living a great moment of history, right on the spot where it is being made. I never thought I would be present at the momentous event, but here I am. You see, someone had to bring some vehicles for MacArthur's staff, and the 717 happened to be empty at the time. We had MacArthur's personal car, a Cadillac, among others. We beached at Yokohama, and as far as we have been able to find out, we were the first ship to beach on Japanese soil. Some fun. Carl. He writes a very similar letter to Vi, but it's slightly different, so I'm going to read that one too. Or Ruth. September 2nd. Dear Ruth, I am writing this letter in Tokyo Bay, so will not be able to mail it for some time. If you will look at the date, you will see its significance. The peace agreement was just signed about an hour ago. One of our men snapped a picture of MacArthur and Nimitz as they got into their barge. But he was so excited he forgot something, and the pic did not come out. It is certainly a sight to see the Missouri and all the other big ships. And even if we are kind of small compared to them, we feel kind of proud to be here. We carried up MacArthur's car, a Cadillac, and numerous other cars for his staff. Believe it or not, so now he's made up his mind. The LST 717 was the first to hit the beach at Yokohama. Thrilling, eh, Carl? Aboard ship, now he writes it up top, Tokyo Bay, September 7th, 1945. Dear Vi, well, the censorship has been lifted and I have already mailed you one envelope from here. Everything is very quiet now. My main trouble now is to keep up the morale of the crew, so as all they are thinking about is going home, and we will probably be out here for some time. I have been ashore a couple of times to Tokyo. The civilians are very polite and all smiles. They are rather pathetic, and I am struck with the idea that the ordinary Japanese worker or peasant is no different from the ordinary man in any country. He doesn't get anything out of war except misery. His sons do the fighting and dying, his home is bombed, his crops burned, etc. And he is very relieved when it is all over, no matter who wins. Of course, the military are different. There is no doubt from the way they look that they are still defiant to the end. We have been anchored near several hospital ships, and all day long we see the prisoners of war being brought aboard them. I don't know what holds some of them together, as they are all skin and bones. I went aboard of the hospital ships to arrange for medical supplies and had a chance to talk to a few of the Marines who surrendered back in 1942 at Corregidor. Also talked to a nurse, which was quite a thrill, as she was the second woman I have talked to since leaving the States. I assume you talked to Japanese women. I looked it up in the ship's log, and the last time I had been where I could talk to a woman was last November, one time in New Guinea. I watched my language carefully. He was not a profane man, you guys. Not around his daughter, anyway. I watched my language carefully so I wouldn't swear too much, and had a very enjoyable 15 minutes chat with her. That is one advantage the Army has. They do get to talk to WACs and nurses on shore. We never get a chance on our kind of ship. So that's an interesting complaint, isn't it? We should be leaving here soon, but don't know where to. I still have hopes to be back about next spring. Okay? Hope all goes well with you and Carl. September 7th. Aboard ship Tokyo Bay. So he wrote Ruth too. Now that the censorship has been lifted, I can tell you where I am. Of course, I can't tell you where I'm going from here, even if I knew. The weather here is nice, much cooler than in the Philippines, in fact. It is just like autumn back in the States. They have a beautiful harbor here. That's Tokyo Bay he's talking about. And great docking facilities when they get it all patched up. Yokohama and Tokyo are pretty well banged up. In fact, I would say they are in worse shape than Manila was. Of course, the only thing of interest to the men is when can they get back? I try to arrange as much recreation as I can to keep them busy on their time off, on their off hours, but it is pretty hard. Most of my men have been in the service less than 2 years, and sometimes I get a little irked because I wonder how they would feel if it was 4 years, as it is for me. We should be leaving here pretty soon. As long as I have to be out here, I hope I get over to China before long. By the way, a newsreel camera man was taking pictures the other day, and he shot it, so maybe we will be in the movies. We ought to, as we are the first LST to beach at Manila and the first to beach on Japan in this war. That's something even if we never did see too much action on the invasions. Hope all is well with the old man and the kids, Carl. Aboard ship Okinawa, September 14th. Well, we finally left Tokyo and are now back at Okinawa. first letter. Oh, that's the last one. So you saw both letterheads, that's good. Well, we finally left Tokyo and are now back in Okinawa. We spent over a week at Tokyo, and it was quite an experience. We even went ashore and had a ball game between the officers and the crew. Sports. Now that the war is over, I guess I can tell you that what our ship did in it. We were never actually fired upon. We took part in 3 invasions in the Philippines at Palawan, at Catabo in Mindanao, and at Davao in Mindanao. The Japanese offered practically no resistance. The biggest jitters are on the night before the attack, when you check everything, your gun, helmet, life preserver, etc. On the day of the invasions, everything happens at once. The barrage from the big ships and sorties by airplanes. Then we hit the beach. We were in the first wave at all these operations. The most fun was at Davao, where we sat in the bay all day and watched our planes dive and strafe the Japanese about 2 miles inland. So actually our part in the war was not very much, but I don't suppose that is our fault. Of course, we were lucky in being the first LST to beach at Manila and again at Yokohama. As a little girl, I once asked him, did any of his men die? And he said no, but one of them got a bullet to the wrist, and they had to get him to the hospital ship. Aboard ship Jinsen, Korea, September 22nd. Dear Vi, well, here I am in China, or Korea if you want to be more exact. Jinsen is the seaport for the capital of Korea. It is supposed to have 50,000 inhabitants, but it looks about the size of the city of 15,000 back home. It is the first place I have seen since we left the US that is not bombed, and it is a relief to realize there are some people in the world who still have houses to live in. The trip up here was the worst ordeal we have gone through. We got caught in a typhoon. It was all we could do to keep the old tub afloat. On top of that, we all got sick, including 500 soldiers we were transporting. The waves were so high, they obscured the ships alongside us in the convoy. When you consider that the mast of an LST is 78 feet up, you will realize they were no little ripples. The storm lasted 2 days, and we were all physical wrecks when it was over. We ate only because one is supposed to, and I don't recall ever retaining a meal over 15 minutes. Needless to say, we got no sleep at all. Well, anyhow, the Yellow Sea is calm, and we are now okay. One of the Army officers turned out to be a professional singer, baritone from New York. He was also studying opera, and he and I got together on Solemne Quest Bra. This is Giuseppe Verdi, La Forza del Destino, and it was really something. My dad had a really big singing voice. He was a great big fat guy and looked just like an operatic baritone is supposed to. I have only been ashore once. One thing, the climate is more like back home. In fact, I nearly froze at first. I shudder to think of what a Minnesota winter will do to me when I get back. The Koreans are a lot happier than the Japanese. They probably have some Russian in them. A lot bigger, not happier, bigger, I'm sorry. They are not as friendly outwardly as the Filipinos were, but I think a good deal more sincere, which is interesting. They really hate the Japanese, who are still wandering around in uniform. God only knows where my next letter will come from. Carl. CB Base, Okinawa, October 3rd. Dear Vi, this letter is written under most unusual circumstances as I am on the beach. At present, I am sitting in a shack dressed in a green uniform borrowed from a CB officer. I was on a trip in the Loop to a command ship, so he was off the LST. When a storm came up, we tried to return to the ship out, but she took off to sea to ride out the storm. So we headed for the beach, and here we are. We had to ride 30 and 40-foot waves in a howling gale in the little boat. I had 10 men and 1 other officer aboard, and God knows how we made it. It is funny, but I have been in more danger since the war ended than before, it seems. The weather is a formidable opponent up in these parts. Anyhow, we are stranded here at Hagushi, Okinawa, and the CBs are taking care of us. They have fed us and even treated us to beer, and they are a darn swell bunch. They also have recent copies of Time, and I am reading September 17th issue. In it, it states that the worst atrocities of the Japanese, the worst atrocity of the Japanese was at Porto Princess, Callahan. Maybe you remember my mentioning the terrible things we saw there. We were in on the first wave of the invasion there, so if you have read Time, you know what we saw, as the fires were still burning and the bodies had not had time to entirely decompose. Hope this storm lets up so we can get back to the ship soon, particularly as I'm hoping for mail one of these days. Mail. We have not received any since the war ended, but we have been at sea practically all the time. Hope you received my letters from Tokyo and Korea. The last experience has taught me a healthy respect for that phrase, the perils of the sea. Thank God I have a small boat coxswain with a lot of guts and savvy. I checked the spelling of that word with Noel Peterson as I came in the room. Coxswain, C-O-X-S-W-A-I-N. Say hello to that old sea dog, Brother Ivar, for me. Now the last letter. Okinawa, October 14th, 1945. Dear Ruth, I suppose by now the news of our big storm is old stuff, but we have constant reminders here by looking at 50 or 60 ships piled up on the rocks. It was the worst typhoon in the last 20 years to hit the Pacific. Our ship has been dragged off the reef by now. We are anchored by our stern anchor as our bow anchor was sheared off in the storm. We have some men out in diving outfits trying to recover it. The wind instruments at the airfield were blown away, but they registered 120 knots before the wind got too strong for them. We saw several ships capsize, and some broke into pieces. Of course, there were collisions. We were hit in the bow doors by a ship, and it stove a big hole in us. But it was high above the waterline. They have not announced the casualty list, but I am afraid it will not be pleasant reading. And I did look this up for you. In the typhoon, the United States Navy had 12 ships sunk near Okinawa. 222 ships were grounded, and 32 were severely damaged. As to the death list, it's sort of hard to figure out, so I'm just going to say that in the typhoon season in that year, a total number of dead, and it may include more than the Navy, our Navy, obviously Asians too, 3,798 people died in that typhoon season. I certainly wish they would abandon this place as it is the typhoon junction. Hope we get patched up soon and get the heck out of here. He didn't say heck. I was more scared during the typhoon than I ever was during the war. Unless you go through one, I don't think you can quite visualize what it is like. And I've had all of it I want. Maybe if we are damaged badly enough, they will patch us up and send us back to the States. I can dream, can't I? Love to you all, Carl. Well, I know the rest of the story. He did get back for that 5th Christmas. He'd served a long time. And he spent Christmas Eve at Ruth's house, but he just arrived right before Christmas. He went back to teaching at Patrick Henry High School. And then when he turned 40, they said, you know, you qualified for the principal's position. Here's an application. And he always said he didn't fill it out, but my mother did and mailed it in. So at age 40, he became the youngest person at that point to become a principal in the Minneapolis Public Schools. And the highlight of that was that he eventually became the high school principal for Phil Quanbeck. And with that, I want to thank all the volunteers, all of you for coming, and all the staff who helped me, Pastor Tim, Julie Newton, and Tracy Shar. But most of all, I want to say, thanks for everything, Dad. And now we'll put your voices in the room if you microphone to ask questions or comments? Or perhaps, can I just ask, if you wish, everyone who was in the military, do you want to stand so we can acknowledge you before this Veterans Day? I would just appreciate it. Thanks to everyone who served. Paula?
I always said I served 23 years as a
As
dependent.
a dependent?
As a dependent.
As a dependent.
You know me well.
Okay. Yes, and family members. Some of us come from families that have a military background, so, you know, anyways. I thought we'd have a microphone. I'll repeat questions. Yes, go ahead.
When did he meet your mom?
Oh, yes, so he gets back and he's in his early 30s, and they were both high school debate coaches, so they met in Red Wing. So when I moved down here, they would come to visit, and then they'd take a left-hand turn and go and eat lunch in Red Wing, which was very romantic for them. As a matter of fact, it was my dad's team who said to my mother's team, you know, Mr. Anderson isn't married. And my mother always said, she judged his team, and she always said, if I hadn't given your dad's team the win, none of you would have ever been born. So my brother Paul is born in 1948, my sister Judy in 1950, and I'm born in 1953. And they got married just in 47. So it took him a couple of years to find her. But yeah, now you know how old I am. I was told there'd be no math.
So how long do you think it took to get mail back and forth?
Boy, that would have to be something to be researched, but I think that the Pentagon sure understood the importance of the mail. They kept trying to get it to all these different, the idea that they sent them food, wasn't that amazing? And of course it's sort of wrong-headed because the food couldn't get there intact. I don't know what people were thinking. But they would put it in planes, you know, it would go out, I know that much, and then they'd try to match up the mail with the port where that ship was going. But as you could tell from some of his comments, it wasn't a perfect system, and sometimes they waited a long time to receive the mail, but it was a real lifeline. And you think of people now, they have cell phones, so they can actually interact with their family on a fairly regular basis.